I have created something truly horrible. Let's talk about Frankenstein.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back, the Eye of the Storm podcast. So, today we're going to be discussing or debating Frankenstein. But before we get into that, you already know what time it is. What's the best recent thing that we've seen? I saw a Netflix series called Marked. I'm currently on the first episode of it, so I'm pretty much like a family. I think that they're a Christian family in South Africa in financial difficulty, and they need to find, I think it's 1.2 million so they can pay for her daughter's surgery. The wife was an ex-cop, but now she works. They don't work for the banks, but they pretty much transport money. And obviously, a lot. Like, if you know what's going on in South Africa, especially that job is very, very dangerous because there's a lot of people that always, well, criminals that always try and rob those type of people. So she ends up planning like a heist, being like an inside woman in from the first episode, and then it all goes wrong at the end. So far, so good. So I'll recommend it so far.
Yeah, I watched a couple more episodes of Fallout season two. I think it's fine. It's like kind of easy TV to watch. I actually kind of feel like I've like fallen out of love with watching TV series. Or there's not really been one that's like really captured me in a while. Like everything's just kind of like background TV, which is a shame. And I didn't really catch too many movies this week as well. So yeah, watch Fallout. If you haven't seen Fallout, I think it's good enough. Nothing amazing. If you don't watch it, you won't lose anything.
Pretty much the only thing I heard about it was about how much filler it has, and about how it kind of meanders from one thing to the next, but there's not much of a story going on. Is that correct? Because the first season did have a story, but it was I thought it was kind of overstuffed because it tried to set up this entire world, and almost it felt like they were trying to set up like 6 seasons all at once, and that's kind of made it feel very crowded. Is season two more like this, or is the criticism that I've read that it's basically just killing time? And then there's probably like some plot in the last 2 episodes, which wouldn't be the first streaming series that has done this, right? But is it one of those, or is there an extra story?
I mean, I'm only on episode two so far. It does kind of feel like it's kind of just like meandering a little bit, just kind of trying to do interesting or like impressive stuff. But I don't know. I was kind of like watching this while I was cooking as well. So I don't think I was like fully as engaged in the story as I probably should be. But it did really feel like there was just like stuff happening and none of it of real interest, to be honest. So maybe valid criticism for it in season two, but I don't know. I don't have a strong attachment to it, which is funny because it's on my recommended for the week, but it's not a strong recommendation. It's just kind of give it a watch type thing if you have time.
Because I'm totally fine with the Fallout world. It's not my favorite thing exactly, but it's fine. But I don't want to spend another 8 hours just to find out that there was no story. I'm just done with that.
The only like one that I'm like really truly interested in is the initial nuclear explosion and the guy's wife and her involvement in it and actually how it all came to play. I think that's the only storyline that like has my interest. But then like you said, there's a whole bunch of like other characters on the side, and of course I've not played the game properly, so I'm not invested in some of the other things that you see in this. But yeah, all the other kind of like storylines, I'm not that interested in. I think the only thing that's keeping me watching is I just kind of want to find out what happened with the guy, his wife, his kid, and the initial nuclear explosion that happened in the city. Actually, there was one interesting thing was the girl's dad. I don't know what her name is in this. It's Ellie Purnell, or whatever like that. The woman that plays the main character. It was actually interesting just seeing her dad in the show being one of the people that set off one of the explosions that goes off somewhere. Again, I was cooking while watching this, but yeah, he kind of is like responsible for it. You can see he detonates it on his tablet and then kind of goes back to being with his family, which is pretty dark. So just all of that stuff around that, I'm interested in. Anything else is just whatever.
Glowing recommendation.
Thank you.
All right, so I watched The Great Gatsby, the 2013 version by Baz Luhrmann. Now, The Great Gatsby is one of those movies that's a classic novel. It's basically this story about a guy who kind of more or less by accident slips into the high society of the new money elites of New York in like the 1920s. And there are these lavish parties and this incredible luxury and this incredible inequality where most of the population is living in the mud and a small percentage lives in giant palaces and all of that, right? So it basically follows a story where this guy encounters Gatsby, who is kind of this, today he would be a billionaire who is kind of this mysterious past, and he kind of takes him into this world, and then there's more to Gatsby's history than he initially let on, and there's a whole thing, there's romance involved and all of that. There's lots of versions of the story. You can read the novel. There's probably like 20 versions. Like, it's been filmed probably something like 20 times. What makes the 2013 version fun is the spectacle, because visually it's a real overload. It's like an all-you-can-eat buffet in terms of its visuals. The costumes and the spectacles and how the parties are shown, and just this extreme decadence and wealth and luxury is just put on screen in a way that is just refreshing, where a lot of movies really hold back and you have to wait for the payoff. This just showers you with visuals for 2 hours, basically. Just as a story, The Great Gatsby has some issues, like in terms of what characters do and why they do it and all of that. But it's just a visual feast, this version. Like, just as a movie and as a reminder that movies can be fun just to watch, as in just being a visual spectacle. This is like a good reminder, because that's kind of fallen out of favor a little bit. Like, even when we get good one, like visually impressive movies, they're few and far in between, right? Like, the average movie just doesn't go for spectacle as much anymore, and if they do, it's kind of unmotivated CGI nonsense. And this is like very motivated. Like, this is very, very deliberate, and it's designed to convey particulars or create particular sensations, and it pulls it off really well. And then you've got some great actors in there who really kind of have fun with those roles and all of that. So it's a fun watch.
Okay, so it looks like it's time for the main event. Frankenstein. Daniel, can you please give us one of your wonderful, lovely synopsises?
All right, so we're talking about the 2025 version of Frankenstein. This is directed by Guillermo del Toro, and it came out on Netflix back in November. It's essentially a take on the Frankenstein story. It's essentially told in 3 parts. In the first one, Victor Frankenstein is on a ship in the Arctic and is being hunted by a monster that turns out to be his creation. Then we switch to part 1, which is Victor's story of how he loses his mother to illness. He becomes obsessed with life and death and triumphing over death through intellect. And he goes on this journey trying to create life in the lab, essentially. At the end of that part of the story, he succeeds creating the creature, which is an artificial person that he has brought back to life from the pieces of corpses. And then the second part is the creature's story. After he escapes an attempt by Victor Frankenstein to kill him, he escapes, takes refuge in the wilderness, and figures out life and how to take revenge on his creator in the second story. And then towards the end, the story ends with them reconnecting in the Arctic, where the creature catches up with Victor and they have a showdown. That's basically the story. So what did we think of Frankenstein?
I like the film. I really like the tone of the film. It was raw, dark, and violent. Just my type. I didn't expect the antagonist to be the antagonist. That's something which was also like an interesting take and something which I actually enjoyed. However, the issues I did have, I wouldn't say they were minuscule. There was something which, for me, was noticeable, but it didn't affect my experience. I still liked the film. It was just the way that it happened. Like, for example, the transitioning from friend to enemy within the film, it felt kind of abrupt. All in all, I had a good time with this film. I was pleasantly surprised, I'll be honest with you. When I watched the trailer, I said, this is not for me. But then obviously watching the film, the tone of the film felt completely different. I've never seen a Frankenstein movie. So, of course, I've heard of Frankenstein. I obviously know his significance, but I've never watched it. So I was walking into this completely blind, and I left pleasantly surprised and quite happy that I watched this film.
This film kind of is in 2 parts for me. The first half of the movie, where we're kind of focused on Victor and his journey and his obsession, I thought was like fascinating. I thought it was like interesting. It was very much along for the ride. And then the second half was very boring. It's kind of just like plain and simple. It just kind of felt like it dragged a bit, and there was a lot of like meandering or spending too long on certain scenes and stuff, or like being a little bit overindulgent. I would say, like, the movie's like 2.5 hours. You can quite easily cut about like half an hour out of this. From the second half onwards, I don't think I was like invested in the characters. So when they were doing this, things are happening to the characters, the stakes kind of going back and forth, etc. I didn't really find myself caring all too much about it, which is a bit of a shame. But there's lots of good things in the movie. I think the way it's shot, I think the aesthetic of the movie is actually really nice. And that's kind of like from the costumes, the world building, the settings that they're in different places. I actually quite liked it. But yeah, I don't know. Like I was having quite a bit of fun, just kind of following Victor and his like morally grey self through the first part of the movie. But I don't know. It just kind of took a bit of a nosedive for me. Unfortunately, it kind of felt like the last half an hour. I was just like, can this movie end at this point? It was kind of like dragging a little bit, just because, again, when you're talking about like character tension, conflicts within characters, etc. I don't know. I just didn't buy it. And then there's just like certain flips that just happen. I didn't see where it came from, how it came about, why certain characters had change of heart and stuff like that. And I was kind of left scratching my head a little bit. Right? So I think overall, like, it's a fine movie, and this is one of the ones where I can understand why people will like it. It's just for me that second portion of the movie was it just kind of almost put me to sleep, is what I'd say.
So I read the book a long time ago, like 15 years ago, and I've seen a few different versions of the Frankenstein story, and there have been many different movies and other takes on that idea, and they're quite different in a lot of the time. I walked into this kind of saying, okay, I'm interested in seeing Del Toro's take on this. Like I'm ready to see a take that is maybe not the same as everybody else and is maybe filtered through very specific sensibilities, or that is just not quite the same as all the others I've seen. And what I got was a little bit of an unfocused mess, where it kind of tries to do so many different things that there's no time spent on most of them. It kind of moves from one plot point to the next, and it kind of touches on a whole bunch of different ideas, but doesn't really realize most of them and doesn't really develop them, and actually uses that as a foundation for a story. And that is things including the conflict between creator and creation, and the idea of fathers and sons, and the idea of discipline and punishment for mistakes, and the idea of like a blank slate trying to figure out humanity and not liking what it sees, and all of like there's all these different ideas here. And then there's the whole part about just the process of creating the creature, which takes up probably over half an hour. Put all that together, and I thought it was a really frustrating viewing experience, because you could find pieces here or there that worked quite well, and for the most part it looks nice and all of that. And I'm not saying it's poorly acted or anything like that. So if you take any one scene, any one piece of it, there's stuff to like. But in totality, I found it very disjointed and very unfocused and lacking kind of a thesis, at least that I could tell. And if there is one, or to the extent that there is one, it's drowned out by unrelated stuff, so that the movie as a whole doesn't really have time to fully discuss what it wants to discuss. For all of those reasons, I did not quite enjoy my time with this movie. I seem to be different from most people in that I thought the first half was quite boring. The second half is where the interesting stuff happens, which is where the creature goes out into the world and tries to figure itself out, figure humanity out, try to just find a place where it belongs. And it can't, because it's too different, it's too frightening. And then the creature blames its creator for that and goes and decides to go after him because that's the only thing he can do. Like, those are the things, the parts of the Frankenstein story that I find interesting, and they are there, but they are very rushed, and they are not fully realized, because they're not brought to a point where I say, okay, now it's made its point and now the story is completed. It starts and stops in various places. So for that reason, I found the whole thing very, very frustrating, and not something where I said, okay, yeah, this is a great take on an old story. Let's talk about it.
Looks like he hasn't really enjoyed this film. But let me just start off by asking. So the narrative perspective. So obviously we saw that it shift from Victor to the actual creature halfway through. Did that work for you guys? What are your thoughts towards that transition?
For me, I had like a few issues with the narrative, because you say it switches from Victor to the monster Frankenstein. I also kind of took issue. Well, I'll say I took issue with that, and I'll go into why. But I also kind of took issue with the sort of narration in present day. I thought it was cool the first time they did it, and I thought the story was going to unfold from there. But it kept harping back to like him being in the cabin on the ship. I just didn't like that choice of sort of the way that they did it, just because I didn't feel like that was like adding anything significant. We were just kind of like going back to them in this room, and he was just like expanding a little bit more about his story, and I didn't see the purpose of it, and it was just like a little bit grating. The shift from Victor to Frankenstein the monster, I think it started off fine, like, you know, like the whole him trying to learn the world and understand the world and discovering new things, and just like interacting with everything in like a very pure way. But it quickly just like overstayed its welcome. And I quickly found myself thinking, like, why are we spending so much time here? Like, it wasn't as exciting and it wasn't as thrilling. And I like the pacedness of, you know, and the franticness of like being with Victor and sort of being on his journey and sort of trying to complete the thing, and just like the elevated theatrics of all of that just was a little bit more captivating than when the movie was kind of almost like ground to a halt, and you're like, you know, you're spending time with him and he's like at a bush and he's like picking at stuff, and he's like with an animal and you're there for ages, or he's like lurking in the shadows and listening to people read a book and stuff like that. And I get that's all like informing what he's becoming and who he's becoming, and like, you know, giving him a bit of humanity and stuff. But it's just dry to watch. I understand why they did it, and I understand that they kind of want to, you know, try to have this story where you kind of, you know, slowly realize that actually Victor's the real monster in this. And I think that they were a bit heavy-handed in that as well, in terms of the portrayal of Victor versus Frankenstein the monster.
Can I ask something?
Go for it.
Can I ask something? How much did you guys know the Frankenstein story before this? I think, Jonathan, you said you didn't know it at all, and Hervé?
I know it a little bit, not super well, but I know it a little bit.
Because this whole thing, it's not so much that Victor is the monster, it's that the creature is innocent and it just wants to exist because it's been birthed into existence without being asked, right? Like, it just exists and now it wants to figure itself out. It wants to belong somewhere. It wants to understand the world. It wants to, you know, have a connection with its creator. And Victor rejects it for being monstrous in the book. And here he rejects it for being stupid, where he tries to teach the creature to talk and it's not going as fast as he would like, right? And that is kind of when he rejects the creature, and that's kind of sets the sequence of events into motions that ends up with him burning his lab down and the creature narrowly escaping. But this whole idea that the monster is not the monster, like, that's the whole point of the story. Because like this whole thing about he gets treated with kindness as long as people don't see him. But the minute they see what he looks like, they treat him like a monster and are afraid of him and want to kill him. And so he can never connect to another person. That is why, for instance, like that farmer guy, like the old man, is blind, because he does not see that the monster is a monster, and therefore he treats him with kindness, right? And that is why he can, you know what I mean? Like, that's kind of the point.
I get that's like the point, and I think it maybe like overstates it a little bit. And when I say overstates it, I feel like there's just like too much of it going on, and it's too slow when it's happening. I don't feel nothing is the problem with it. Like when it's all happening and when he's, you know, seeing the girl and stuff like that, I don't feel anything. If I don't feel anything and it's not as exhilarating or it's not as entertaining or anything like that, then that's what kind of where the problem lies. And I think where I say like it was a bit like I don't know, it just felt like up to a certain point in the movie where I think, you know, when Victor's kind of going about what he wants to do, there's that element of like it being a little bit more morally grey. It's like, yeah, he needs like these victims, but he's getting them from soldiers that have died in the war, or he's getting it from, you know, people that are being executed. For example, so these are criminals that are going to be executed anyways. He's like a little bit careless about it, and he doesn't have like the right level of empathy towards it. And he's also pursuing his brother's girl as well, which also adds to, you know, the level of these are things that you shouldn't be doing, but you're still half rooting for him in that side. And then you kind of get to Victor. I just kind of like envisioned a little bit of a journey of like, you know, going from the monster to actually, you know, finding his innocence or whatever. But it's just like whatever from the get-go. And I understand your explanation, and it kind of like makes sense in that front as well. But it just didn't make for great viewing.
The movie is very much framed as here's Victor's side of the story and here's the creature's side of the story. It's like that's what the title card says, and each one takes up about half, right? And it's bookended by the episodes on the Arctic ship, right? One expectation this created in me was that we're going to get kind of the same story, but from two different perspectives. We would see things from Victor's point of view, and then we would see the same thing or a similar thing from the creature's point of view, and that they would look very different depending on who you are and how you're looking at this, right? And that is definitely not what we got here, right? It seems to me like Like there is a shift here, right, where the creation of life in the first part is treated as an intellectual problem, right? It's a scientific, technical problem to be solved, and we see Victor kind of go through the steps. He just assembles the pieces, right? And then he creates the creature, and then perspective shifts to the creature, which looks at it from a more emotional point of view, right? Where like this the sensation of being born into a world where you don't belong and nobody wants you and you don't understand it and all of that, right? So I guess it works on that level, but like the framing of it, of saying here are the two stories, kind of made me expect something different. And I think that was to the detriment of my viewing experience.
I hear what you're saying, but for me, that continuation is actually something that I liked. Because when I saw Frankenstein was going to tell his perspective, the first thing that came into my mind, first I was like, oh my God, why did they just ruin the momentum? Because obviously with Victor's story, it was getting really good and very, really interesting. I thought it was going to be a flashback, but a flashback from Frankenstein's perspective. When that thought came into my head, I was thinking, oh my God, like, it just something which a lot of the times I just find so annoying. Like, actually, I take that back. I don't find it annoying, but I find it annoying when there is momentum, when I'm getting really engulfed in a story and I'm like, oh my God, I have to go all the way back. So that thought kind of, annoys me. I like flashbacks in between stories rather than at the end of like an important event. So when we want to see the monsters story, I was thinking, damn, it was a flashback, but it wasn't. It was a continuation. So I was like, okay, this feels kind of. I wasn't expecting the way the way his perspective was going to be told in that fashion. And I liked that they made that decision. In terms of the story that was being told, it wasn't as interesting as Victor's.
Was there any part where I said, yeah, I'm really into this? I'm okay if that's the rest of the movie. There are a lot of different ideas in this, right? We've got the scientific thing about creating the creature. We've got this creature struggle for survival. We have this whole thing about other people taking an interest in Victor's science for their own reasons, right? Like there's this character who is dying from syphilis and wants a new body, essentially. And that is why he bankrolls the research, and that is why he reacts so negatively and it gets so out of hand when Victor turns him down, because it's not even doable at this point because the guy's brain is already infected, right? So getting a new body wouldn't save him. And then there's also like the moral aspect of how do you even get the parts, right? Like Hervé, like you mentioned, getting parts from fallen soldiers and from criminals who have been executed. There's the scientific establishment's view of his research that they are kind of arguing from a religious point of view, that they're saying creating life is blasphemy, therefore you can't do it regardless of whether or not it's possible. And then you've got kind of his flashbacks to his family, where his father tried to beat excellence into him, and that is why he ends up mistreating the creature when he doesn't learn as quickly as Victor would like it, right? So there's a lot of different parts here going on. My question is, was there something where I said, like, was there a favorite part, or was there something that you wish the movie had focused on more?
I think the parts that I enjoyed or kind of stood out to me was just like the parallel between Victor and his father. And I think like the fundamental issue that he had is the way that he was trying to teach Victor, in kind of being like chained up in one room. You could see he had like the rod similar to what his father did, and was kind of like abusing him for getting things wrong. That sort of those like negative behaviors, negative patterns that he picked up from his father, where, if he'd attempted to try to do things slightly differently, and you can almost even like see it in like the first time that Frankenstein kind of really comes to life, and then he opens the window and he's like, see the sun's life, and it's almost like that invitation to actually go outside and see the world and explore the world and start to shape yourself and make your experiences through the world. But it's almost like Victor, the only way he knew how to like teach and like educate the monster was just being locked in the room, as we kind of saw as we see earlier in the movie. It's just like being locked in this room and having to like study and like read and like repeat stuff, or like just like repeat what he'd known before. So I thought that was like interesting, at least, and maybe could have been explored a little bit further. Maybe not be like the sole focus of the entire movie, but maybe have like a stronger sense to it. And again, that kind of also speaks to the whole maker versus like creation thing as well.
And there's like a version of this where kind of the core of the movie is Victor trying to shape his creation in his image and failing for various reasons, right? And kind of talking about life and philosophy and knowledge and about a world that the creature has never seen and only knows from Victor's descriptions, or how he reacts to that, or it pretty much doesn't matter which part of this you pick. My answer is pretty much always the same, which is it's kind of cool, but I wish it had been expanded on more. I wish we had kind of made a point about it. Victor's a very flawed person. He's clearly very smart, very driven. He's kind of a visionary, right? But what does it look like when he gets to shape a life in his image? And what if it doesn't agree? What if it doesn't? If it rejects something that Victor cares about? Like, how does he react then? Because he's used to being the smartest person in the room and not taking other people's points of view seriously, right? Because he doesn't need to, because they're wrong and they know less about various topics. Like, the closest is kind of when Elizabeth kind of shows an interest in science. It's kind of refreshing for him, and that's kind of when she gets his attention. But she's still, like, her knowledge of science is still tiny compared to his, right? So she's not really an equal to him, right? So in that sense, Victor has never known an equal. And how do you deal, like, if you have complete control over another being and you can shape them however you want, what does a person like Victor do? And, like, I was kind of missing just it taking the next step and kind of developing, for instance, this idea or any idea to a point where I say, oh, that's cool. This is taking it to a place that's not obvious. And it's kind of missing.
Yeah, that's kind of why I was like partly disappointed. I think it's like even more so towards like the latter parts as well. And I think like I know like based on the book you have to get to the point where Elizabeth dies and his brother dies and stuff like that. But just kind of when it kind of descended to this whole like cat and mouse game of like Frankenstein going after Victor and then afterwards Victor going into Frankenstein. Like I think by that point I was checked out. It's a very long movie. I think by that point I was checked out, so I was probably enjoying it a lot less than what the people were enjoying. And I know you kind of have to have like those mandatory things in there, but even like the conversation that they have in his room and like at the wedding and stuff, like this is meant to be like almost like a big reunion. It's meant to be like a big thing where like Victor thought he killed Frankenstein, went about his life and kind of continued, whereas like Frankenstein then discovered what life meant and this and the other, and they're coming back as one. And I just found that whole scene very underwhelming, and everything that came after that underwhelming, because there wasn't like this like big idea that was like the main driving point of the movie that came to head at that point. It was just more of a, I mean, there was like elements of that in there, but it just, I don't know, for whatever reason, just fell flat and just didn't seem like it probably should have.
Jonathan, any favorite parts that you wish the movie had been about?
Well, in terms of what I wish the movie would have been about, because like I said, I kind of enjoyed this more than you guys. I do agree with the points that you kind of made. It kind of does fall in line with what I said about like the transitioning was a bit too abrupt. They should have took us more on a story when it comes to the theme of, Victor's kind of like God complex. There was a scene that I actually did enjoy, which was the scene when they were going on the battlefield. Victor was on the battlefield, pretty much just looking for bodies, because already it kind of does fall in line with the whole his kind of like characteristic and his kind of like persona of being like a god in a way, because the way he was just seeing bodies as raw material to build, like you said, someone in his image. Also, it kind of showed me kind of like that era's obsession with death too. So I was like, damn. So I was kind of not learning, because I don't know, it was definitely set in a historical event period. I forgot what period it was, 'cause I actually read this up, but I forgot what that specific war was called. But I think in that era, the death toll was crazy. I don't know if that adds to the story.
What killed that part for me is that there's no conflict. Like, Victor kind of just does his thing, and he has like a checklist of 8 things he has to do, because that's what the story is, and he just does them. Like, there's not very much in the way of conflict. There's a little bit when he is dealing with Harlander, where Harlander kind of tries to co-opt Victor's work, and Victor pushes back, and it ends in Harlander's death. Like, that's sure as conflict, but it also comes out of more or less nowhere. Here's an example of where this movie kind of falls down a little bit in its storytelling, is that at least I didn't notice very many instances of Highlander pushing for faster results, right? I don't recall scenes throughout the movie where Victor talks about his progress and Highlander pushes him to get more results faster, because he secretly knows that he's dying and he's only so much time, and Victor has to succeed before he dies. And Victor doesn't understand why this is happening. He thinks Highlander's just in it for the knowledge, or just because he wants to be part of this project or whatever. And then Highlander reveals his illness, and then it makes sense why he's so impatient. So I don't think that's in there. To me, that would be much more satisfying. and it would feel like stuff is building on each other. Whereas as it feels a lot like things happen in a sequence, but they don't build on each other and they don't follow from each other as much.
I think they try to attempt to kind of like reveal that in the scene where he put his hand on what's her name, Elizabeth. And I think with that scene, because obviously it happened straight after when they went to the restroom. And I think with that scene, I think he reacted that way because I think he saw that moment as Victor kind of like losing focus from the main goal, which was, his focus was elsewhere pretty much. That's what I took from it. That's when he was like, oh, okay. Now, you know what I'm saying, your focus, firstly, you shouldn't even be looking at your brother's wife. And secondly, your focus should be on bringing that life from the dead. So that scene there was the answer.
Well, at this point, I'm looking for foreshadowing, right? I'm looking for seeding the idea that Highlander is on a clock, and we don't know why. And he keeps pushing Victor, and maybe that has ramifications for how many corners he cuts. Or, like, first of all, Highlander is a new character. Highlander is not, like, I think in the original story, he just uses his family money, but he doesn't even have, like, he just works kind of out of his student room while he's building the body. Like, he does not have this big estate, like this property. He doesn't have all this equipment. He kind of just assembles the creature, in a cave from a box of scraps, essentially. So this idea of where does the funding come from is not really a factor, and here it is. And they're introducing this character of Highlander, and they are introducing this reveal of the syphilis and about how somebody else has plans for Victor's work. So they didn't have to do this. They could have just cut this character entirely, right? So that character was added for a reason. So first of all, I'm wondering what the reason is, because it seems to clutter up an already long story. And secondly, if you were doing this properly, like there would be clues earlier on that something is up, and then that's why the reveal is meaningful, because you are getting an answer to a question you've been asking. But at that point in the story, I wasn't asking why Highlander is so impatient, or what Highlander's agenda is, or what he wants from Victor exactly, right? He just seemed to be the guy. Like, in this time and place, it's not unusual for wealthy people to be patron of the sciences. Because scientists would often go to rich people, to nobles, aristocrats, and usually the only reason they would fund the research is for the prestige. Actually, when you study math, like half the things, especially if they're French names, are not actually the names of the people who discovered these principles, but the people who paid their bills, because they then got the credit for it, or kind of they were associated with the discovery. So I didn't even question what Highlander was up to. That's just what aristocrats did in that time. And so this idea that there's another agenda, I think, needed to be seeded and needed to be built up. And I don't think it was. And if it was, it wasn't enough.
I think worst of all is, I don't know how much his death really even served. Like, on top of like the really poor foreshadowing, I don't really feel like his death really served anything to any of the characters at all, or like pushed or changed the narrative of anything really. You just kind of get the revelation, he dies. Like, it doesn't change Victor. It like had no real impact on like his brother or like his wife, apart from like Victor trying to blame Frankenstein for killing him, and it further showing that Victor's a little bit morally grey in his approach. But it just kind of feels like, if this isn't the character that was there already, is that there wasn't enough real thought into how we properly insert and how you kind of adhere the audience to that particular character. It's just there.
Yeah, this whole thing, first of all, we already knew that Victor was morally ambiguous, right? Because we'd already seen him cut all sorts of corners and cross all sorts of lines. And so to kill a guy mostly in self-defense at that point was not that big of a shock. And then it doesn't seem to have huge ramifications because, yes, Elizabeth and the brother show up, asking where the guy is, and he lies about it. And then not much happens because shortly after that, the whole thing burns down anyway. And then we do the time skip.
One, in that massive house, why would there no like butlers and maids? And why was the house overgrown with like trees and stuff like that, outside of just it looking aesthetically like that?
Aside from looking cool, I think it was just a cheap property. Victor, I think, just needed a way to dispose of the bodies, and he needed a way to channel the electricity. And so it being a big tower in a remote place that had this unique architecture, I mean, it kind of just happens, but like it basically, Victor has a series of requirements, and this property meets all his requirements, including being remote.
Guys, I hear what you're saying, but I think Victor's death was used to, amplified the narrative of the monster being a monster, because as soon as he died, he blamed it on the monster. So I think that's his character was just pretty much as a vehicle, just to, like I said, introduce that narrative.
Highlander's death is blamed on the monster, and that's a line for
Yes,
Victor
yes.
to cross.
So yeah, sorry, I mean Harlander's death was used as, so he was pretty much the start of that narrative that the monster. What's the monster's name? Was it just called the monster? Was the monster
The
Frankenstein?
creature.
The creature. So the creature. So yeah. So Victor blamed the creature for Harlander's death. So that's something I think his character was just used to. I do understand. I do actually agree with what you guys are saying in terms of like it did kind of feel like his character amounted to nothing, but at the same time, I said, oh, that was the start of that narrative of the the creature being dangerous and kind of like giving Victor like low-key reason and a backup plan to kill the monster in case all goes wrong.
It just seems like another half-realized idea. Like I could imagine all sorts of ways where this could go, and then it doesn't really, because the plot says there has to be a showdown between Victor and the creature has to escape and then go into the wilderness, and from that point on we follow the creature. It's not like all of this is bad. It's more like, how come this isn't actually like the conflict of the story?
So I can hear what like Jonathan's saying though, in terms of how easy it is to blame the creature for the death and his brother to not bat a single eyelid because of the way it looks. It kind of goes back to when you can't see the creature, when you can't see the monster, you treat him some way. But as soon as you see it, it's very easy to add connotations. It's very easy to add this person did this, or like this person's that way, and like to just attribute negative things to it. So I guess like I guess like that's one aspect of it, but I don't know. It still feel like they could have realized more with that character.
And I think it's a case of picking a lane, right? Like just cut out half the stuff and then focus on the part that actually matters, because so much of it is kind of just going through the motions, right? Like Victor's research and everything that goes into assembling the body and studying the science behind it and all of that. I don't feel like adds very much. Like especially in the first half, in the first hour, I was waiting for the conflict, and there isn't really any. Like Victor kind of just goes from one step to the next, and there isn't really much in the way of opposition. There is technically in that the scientific establishment rejects his research and doesn't want him to succeed, but they're also not an obstacle. They are not in his way. They do not need to be overcome in order for Victor to realize his vision. He gets rejected by them, which is a scene I've seen a dozen times in movies like this, and then not much happens because of it. And then like literally, then like, there's a scene where Victor presents his findings to the Royal Society or whatever it is, and they completely trash him. And they are, first of all, they think he's a fraud, and then when he actually animates a corpse in front of them, they flip and say this is blasphemy and this is an abomination and must not be done. And then he leaves disgraced. And then literally in the next scene, Harlander shows up with a giant check and just bankrolls his research, and there's no further complication from that point out. So if it's a story about prevailing against a system that wants you to fail, it's not that. And if it's a case of once you've created life, what do you do with it? Or what do you do about it? How do you treat it? Then the whole first hour is redundant. You know what I mean? Like it should have picked a lane and stuck to it and realized that. I think that's kind of my big bottom line with this movie.
So I had a question, by the way, because this was something that I was trying to find the answer to. With Mia Goth playing Elizabeth, firstly, Mia Goth actually plays Victor's mum and Elizabeth. So what do you think the intention behind that was?
I mean, if I really try, I can find like a parallel where those are the two women in his life, right? And they're played by the same person. And so he sees them in the same way. That would be kind of the obvious interpretation. I don't know that very much comes from that.
I hear that. I would have thought it would have had more of a significance, because if that's the case, then I'm like, oh, that's a bit rubbish. Because I thought, like, obviously with that, I thought it was trying to say something about obviously Victor's psychology, and maybe it had some sort of link to, I don't know, had some sort of link to what's going on and why, like his obsession with, bringing back the dead to life. So I thought there was a link with that, obviously, because his mother died. Is there a link to life and death and the mother and his love interest? Like, I thought there was some sort of link.
Well, the obvious one is that death took his mother away, and he wants to have power over that because he's completely powerless. It just happens, right? I think she died giving birth to her third child, and so as far as he was concerned, at like 10 years old or however old he was, that his mom just died one day, and there was nothing he could do about it. And that gave him the motive to have power over death.
I definitely agree with that, but I'm saying I thought it all links though, as in with Elizabeth. So with that, I agree. But what does Elizabeth's character have to do with that story? Is it because she rejected him that means he can't do it, but he did? Like he can't bring life back to death, but he actually did end up doing it. Because I thought it was going to be something like that. Because I don't really know Frankenstein's story, but then when he ended up bringing Frankenstein to life, I'm like, oh, okay, so it's not that. That's not the reason for why she played the wife and the mother. So clearly, it's just I don't think there's much of a significance besides what you first said, Daniel.
I can't really connect it to Elizabeth herself. It seems like my interpretation of it is he is very much a person of pure intellect, like in that his intellectual pursuits are his entire life. And now this woman comes into his life who is off limits, right? Because she's with his brother, but she still gets his attention. And she's the only person in the story who has at least the same interests. There's some stuff there. I don't know how to connect it to the mom. Because it's not like he loses her as well, right?
He gets rejected by her. So that's why, I was just trying to link it all together.
Yeah, so there's like a connection there of death, right? Between the two characters played by the same person. Again, I don't know, maybe somebody who's really into the story can explain why it's significant that she's played by the same person. I didn't get much out of it. Because to me, like, especially the mother is like a very standard beat. This character loses his mother to misfortune, right? Like something that just happens, right? And like there isn't a villain there, it just happens. Like life just happens. And that is kind of his motivation for becoming who he is, right? Like, and there doesn't seem to be much else to his mother in terms of what she did or how she influenced him or what she meant to him. It's just purely, I lost somebody I loved and I want to never experience it again.
I was going to ask, the way that the film ends with pretty much a moment of forgiveness and the creature choosing to live, did this ending work for you guys?
No. Honestly, I was like so confused about this. Again, it kind of goes back to this cat and mouse game that they were playing where Victor was hunting him down or whatever. And like there was like a lot of like hate and vengefulness and whatever. And I guess like again, this whole like storytelling convention, like I guess from like hearing the creature's story that Victor maybe had grown some level of compassion for the creature after hearing his story. But from the creature's perspective, it's this person. It was like the flip of him suddenly caring and suddenly being a little bit warmer to Victor in his dying moments, and actually hearing him out after Victor only merely just apologized and nothing really more. Like there wasn't like enough driving force behind that whole forgiveness scene and them.
I think it's actually vice versa as well. I agree with you. I think there wasn't enough, like you said, driving force with Frankenstein to. I'm all about forgiveness. Don't get it twisted. It's just the way that it happened. Like I said, abrupt. There wasn't enough driving force with Frankenstein. Suddenly forgiving Victor, and even with Victor, the way that he just said, "I'm sorry, my son." The way that came out, like that just happened. I was like, that kind of happened out of nowhere. But I assume maybe it happened while Victor was hearing Frankenstein's story. But I don't know. It just the way that it, like you said, the way that it happened, it just like I said, it felt abrupt and it just didn't have enough driving force. I agree.
I did like the kind of like the final shot of like him in the Arctic in the sunshine, and again that mirroring when he was like first created and like feeling the sunshine and like Victor prompting him to like live like the sun, that's life or whatever. So like kind of going after his whole journey. However, I feel about like the whole like acceptance thing and apologies and like how they left it off or whatever. I did like that kind of callback or like that, coming full circle moment where he's in the sun, basking in it, and is embracing life. I thought that was neat.
Yeah, I'm missing kind of the character moment where somebody has a reason for doing something, right? Either Victor being remorseful or the creature forgiving him. It doesn't really completely come out of nowhere, but there isn't like a process where Victor acknowledges the creature's humanity and therefore the creature no longer feels the need to kill him or take revenge or something like that, right? Like it's not something that I could understand. And like it just that kind of thing. Movies do this quite a lot where a character, especially when it comes to things like forgiveness, there seems to be no thought process behind it. It kind of just happens. And you kind of have to guess what the character was thinking and why they made that choice when that choice is the entire point. You can see things like the creature kind of be realizing he was consumed by the quest for revenge and that is no way to live. And that Victor is flawed, but that doesn't mean he deserves to die, for example. And there could be like experiences that lead to the creature coming to that conclusion, or Victor realizing his mistake and realizing he was too strict or too harsh, or had the wrong expectations of the creature and he should have been more patient, or he should have accepted that the creature is his own being and he can't be infinitely molded through Victor's will and all of that, and can't be made to by force and all of like. Give me something, like give me an actual reason for a character to change, as opposed to just them changing.
The reason why I'm saying you're right, it's not that it came out of nowhere, but I think the timeline of things, though, especially the way that it transpired, is because before that whole forgiveness scene, the way that they were going at each other, especially the so like before that they were on a chase, like the Frankenstein was like chasing like pretty much. What was that scene again when they were in the Arctic and they were like trying to kill each other, and then Frankenstein, he said the line.
He literally told him to light the dynamite, and if this doesn't kill him, he's gonna come and get him. And that was like how they left it off before they got onto the boat.
Literally. So then that's why I was like, wait, hold on. How the hell did all of this come about? Was it like Frankenstein's story, which made them go like all the way 360, which is cool. That can happen. Like, it's just the way, there's just the timeline of things. If it was a thing where there was a break, there was a period where, they maybe didn't see each other for a week or something, then cool. I'm not, all right, cool, I'll believe it more. But the way that it happens, because this just happened, the whole Frankenstein chasing him down, that happened not too long after, the forgiveness scene. So that's why I was a bit like,
In the timeline, there's literally minutes between them trying to kill each other and reconciling.
yeah, exactly. So that's why I was like, I know forgiveness it can happen miraculously, but damn, that was quick.
Yeah, but forgiveness is like somebody has genuine regrets and wants to do better, and so you reward them by forgiving them because they're actually going to do better. I don't know, like there has to be a reason. It doesn't have to be a rational reason, but it can be an emotional reason or whatever.
It could be because of the old man. Because remember when the old man was talking about forgiveness as well, and I forgot the scene.
No, but it can't have been, because how many people did he kill after that? I generally thought like his experience with the old man was going to shape him, and he was going to be a little bit more but he had like he was just killing people for fun, and killing people in like very gruesome ways as well.
Yeah. Well, the lesson with the old man is not about forgiveness. It's about his monstrous nature is the barrier, and that humans cannot see beyond appearances. And because he looks like a monster, they have to treat him like a monster. And the old man is the only one who doesn't see his appearance, and that is why he's the only one who is kind to him. That's that point. It does not have much to do with forgiveness, even if he talks about it for a bit. But also in between that scene and when he reunites with Victor on the boat, it's like weeks or months, in which is all about killing. So it's not like that's the turning point.
So I was gonna say, you don't think the forgiveness had a significant part when it comes to like the whole storyline between the old man and Victor? The reason why I think that it was because that scene, I forgot what scene it was, but he was talking about the guy that he killed or something like that, and then pretty much the impact forgiveness had on his life. Obviously, that links to the scene where Frankenstein ended up forgiving Victor. So the forgiveness was something that he discovered through the old man. It's not like Victor taught him this, so it had to be important, an important theme in their storyline.
But is it?
But it had to, because if forgiveness was something that he was taught by Victor, then I would agree it wasn't. But because it's the first time he's heard of forgiveness, which was by the old man, and then he ended up doing it at the end, that's some foreshadowing in itself.
After killing a bunch of people, I don't know, man.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm not saying I hear that.
And it's kind of in self-defense, right? Because Victor is pursuing the creature in the Arctic, right? But instead of running away, he starts killing people. In self-defense, but also with much more violence than he has to, right? He can't run forever, but maybe hide somewhere where there's like cover, and it's not literally the emptiest place in the world.
Him killing all those people does kind of link to his discovery. Remember when he saw the wolves, when obviously the people were killing the wolves when they were killing the sheep, and then that's what he says, something about nature, and those wolves are they're not killing because they want to, something about killing because they have to, or something like nature. So I think
it's in their nature.
Yeah, so I think that kind of links to the whole scene about him killing people straight away. It's not that he wants to kill these people, but
well, they are trying to kill him, so he kills them first.
Even though he knows that he can't die.
Yeah. Yeah, so here's the enlightened version, right? Like, he can't be killed, so he should just walk away. Or take their guns and throw them in the water, and then look at them with a disappointed look and leave. That would be the noble thing.
The creature was on a mission to die.
So why kill the people that are trying to kill you if you want to die?
Because he knows because he knows he thinks Victor's the only one that can actually kill him. He knows that those people, they don't know what the hell they're doing. You know what I'm saying? They're disposable. He's trying to get to his target. In order to get to his target, he has to take out what's in his way.
And any way you piece this up, whatever he learned from the old man, it was not proper forgiveness because he went on some John Wick vengeance.
He was literally born yesterday, right? Like in his defense.
Exactly. And also, he saw wolves literally eating on him. So that happened after he saw the wolves. It's not like it happened before the old man. It's not like it happens, moments later, the old man taught him about forgiveness. It happened. He taught him about forgiveness. He found out who he was. They had another story. They had like another moment. And then after that, I don't know what happened, but then he came back and he saw the old man getting eaten by wolves. So then he raged out.
It all just elicits a shrug from me. Like what's the point? Yeah, you can talk about forgiveness, but the creature is the only being that can truly choose what he wants to be. Like there's no constraints, there's no danger, there's no history, there's no obligation. He can literally be whoever he wants in terms of his moral actions. So this whole thing about like wolves kill because it's in their nature to kill. Well, what's the creature's nature? It doesn't have one. So it's the only thing that doesn't have like a predetermined path. Wouldn't it be cool if that was kind of explored? And that means he doesn't have to take a wrench. He doesn't have to forgive. He doesn't have to kill. He can do whatever he wants. And now the question is, what does he want?
So you're saying that would have been an interesting
me,
story, but what does he want?
Because he's the only one who can truly choose. Because everybody else has a history and a legacy and obligations and all of that. He could have just lived in the forest doing nice things for people, saving them when they get lost, giving them food when they're starving, and never interacting with anybody. You know what I mean? Like that was on the table too. Now we are rewriting Frankenstein, right? Like one of the greatest novels ever written. But like that's kind of in Frankenstein, right? That the whole idea that the creature, and I still don't understand why they took his name away, because in the book he's called Adam, as in like the first man, right? And he is just the creature. And I'm not complaining about it. I'm just wondering what the thought process was in making that change. Anyway, I always found that the interesting part, that the creature is basically being defined by other people, whereas he kind of has all the like there are lots of things he can't do. He can't be part of society, right? But beyond that, he can do whatever he wants. He's strong, he's invulnerable, he can just live in the forest, he can survive anywhere. So he can go anywhere, he can do anything, basically. And he can make any choice he wants. And exploring that, the bulk of it is that he basically realizes how horrible humanity is, because they will never treat him as an equal, purely based on what he is and how he looks. I think that's part of why I find it so underwhelming, is that I was kind of waiting for kind of the big evolution in the creature's mind, right? After the initial survival, and then trying to figure out the world, and then realizing the situation, what choice does it make then? Like everything that happens in the Arctic is just supremely uninteresting to me. Just very briefly, last topic I want to get into. On Rotten Tomatoes, this has 94% audience, 85% reviews. So I think even those of us who like this one are kind of mixed on it, right? Like there's certainly good parts, but overall it's a little bit mixed, right? But audiences seem to just think this is the greatest thing ever. And in the reviews, you get things like best movie of 2025 and masterpiece and visionary take on an old story and all of that. And I don't see it. I honestly don't see kind of the vision. Part of why I don't really have a big thesis about individual pieces of this movie is I spent 2.5 hours waiting for the big thesis. Is this not supposed to be kind of the new fresh take on an old story? And I was waiting for the take, and I was kind of not getting it. And as a result, the entire thing is a little bit jumbled, and I cannot really empathize with somebody looking at this and saying, oh, this is a masterpiece of storytelling and filmmaking. Because to do that, it would need to have at minimum a thesis that is also realized well, I think.
I can't really have an opinion on this. Like I said, I do a great job. I wouldn't say I'm mixed. I like the film. I have told you guys what my issues were with the movie. I'm not part of the group that thinks that this movie is a masterpiece.
Well, does it surprise you when I say this has 94%?
I expected it to be high. Like I said at the very top of the review, like I found the second part of it to be boring, but I can understand why people would like it overall. I think, for a more kind of casual, general audience, I can see the appeal when you kind of aren't sort of completely picking apart, the movie and its story. It has, elements that like people like. I know you said that there wasn't great conflict in Victor's story, and while that might be the case, you like I think it's like charisma and his charm and like his energy, and I think it's mainly his energy really kind of carries you through his story, and makes you want to go on this adventure with him and actually kind of see how Frankenstein was being put together, and again all the different moral missteps that he took in doing so as well. I actually think you get good level of violence in this as well. Obviously, you have like that slower part where it's like really feeling itself and like being self-indulgent in the creature's perspective of the story as well. So I'm not surprised that it's high. Like I think there's like enough elements there for people to like it, but I wouldn't go as far as saying that this is a masterpiece. I think it falls quite short of that. I think this is like a good movie, not great and not whatever. And something like Rotten Tomatoes is like it's either thumbs up or thumbs down when it goes to the percentages. And I think I can see how enough people would give it a thumbs up overall. But I don't know. For me, it's kind of just like average. I'm not mad that I saw it. I'm not like I didn't hate it, but it just didn't move me the way that it moved other people.
Yeah, but when you look at the reviews, the positive ones aren't saying this is flawed but enjoyable or flawed but a good attempt or something. It's not equivocal at all. A lot of it is just flawless movie, best thing ever, instant classic, best movie of 2025, that sort of thing. So this is not like one of those things where everybody gives it like 51% and that's why it gets 100%. Like a positive review could be mixed leaning to good, or it could be the best thing ever and it all counts as a thumbs up, right? Like that's the big limitation in Rotten Tomatoes. But here it is, everybody thinks it's the best thing ever, pretty much. And the negative ones kind of echo a lot of what we've been saying. It's a bit unfocused and it's a bit messy and individual pieces may be good, but ultimately doesn't amount to very much and all of that, right? So it's like a very polarizing. And this is one of those movies where I have to wonder, did the people who gave this a positive review watch the same movie I did? Because usually if somebody has a different opinion than me on a movie, I can at least see where they're coming from. I can see, okay, you have a different emphasis or focus or expectation, and because of that, you liked a movie that I didn't like, or the other way around. And here I genuinely do not see it. I think this is a very expensive mess that could have been something had there been more focus on the story, which is have a clear idea of what it's actually about and what your take is on this old story, and then build everything around that. I think that's what it would have taken it to be a really good movie. Because as it's like you talked about the action earlier, I think that's actually to its detriment, because that takes up a whole bunch of time. Like this whole battle scene in the ice looks nice, and by itself, I kind of enjoyed watching it, but it does not really connect to much else in the movie. It's not what the movie is about. It's not about overcoming the monster or something like that, or anything like that. And so it feels like that stuff is added in to either fill time or to kind of check a box where some segment of the audience will be entertained by the action, and then kind of sit through the rest and walk away saying a good movie. That's what it seems like to me.
I think, Daniel, sometimes you have to remember that your bar is extremely high sometimes for movies compared to the general like audience in terms of like what's kind of good to great. Like you're great compared to someone else. It's like I think you've got a much higher bar.
One of my favorite movies is The New Guy.
True.
While we are recording this conversation, I am in critical mode and I want to kick the tires. It's like buying a used car, right? I expect to be scammed, and so I want to kick the tires, hoping to get something good, but expecting something bad. And so I want it to pass that test. And then if it makes it to the other end, then I can say, okay, this is a good movie. And if I just watch a movie, I put on a random movie on streaming, like on a Friday night or something, my hurdle is not quite that high, but I do look for the idea. I look for something that makes me say, "Oh, this is something. This is something inventive, creative, or just well done." And if that carries the movie, I walk away having enjoyed the movie. And that is what I was looking for in this, and that's what I was not getting. And that is kind of why I'm so down on it. I'm totally on board with the execution being flawed. We kind of had this with Shelby Oaks, right? Where we had this conversation about, oh, does this have potential? And I was looking for the potential, I didn't find it. I didn't find the good idea that was not realized very well. I was seeing a movie that was kind of, again, a disjointed mess with lots of different ideas, none of which really carried the movie. And that's why I ended up thinking of it as a bad movie. And here, a similar principle is at work, where there's a lot of individual pieces that are pretty well done. but they don't add up to like a core that holds up the movie, that compensates for the bad parts. It's like a scattershot approach where it does 8 different things and none of them dominate, and so none of them make up for maybe flaws in execution or something. Because I don't think execution is the problem here. I think it's the idea.
Yeah, I think we're in agreement with that. There's very little here that I kind of look at or see and say like, this was shot bad, or like this was not really well made, or anything like that. I think it's all in the idea. I still stand by like that. I don't know. I was kind of getting taken out of the movie a little bit with like the whole jumping back to present time stuff. It's just like unnecessary, unnecessarily different.
Yeah, it certainly didn't improve the movie. I don't think. And I think it would have been if there was like a clear thesis and Frankenstein justifying himself to the captain was the expression of the thesis, and then we see everything that led up to him being in that place, right? That could have been one of many ways to do it, right? And again, like that's I kind of was not getting something to that effect. All right, shall we wrap it up? As it's getting late.
Overall, I like the film. Of course, there were its problems, and I've let it be known. But I think the first half is the half I believe most people would say was their favorite part. And of course, many people did like the second half, as we can see from Rotten Tomatoes. But personally, for me, the first half did enough for me to give this film a 7 out of 10. So yeah, 7 out of 10.
I actually don't think I'm on like the hype train the same as everyone else is for Guillermo del Toro or whatever his name is. Because I think we've done a few of his movies now, and I think I saw like Pinocchio and stuff like that as well. And I don't know, they're like just different and not my kind of different. I think we've been a little bit critical of the movie, but it's not a stay clear of this movie. You shouldn't watch it. Like don't touch this with a barge pole. I think watch it, and I think you'll kind of like form your own opinion of it. And like I said, I think my criticism was more so to do with the entertainment value as a whole, mainly in the second part, just where it kind of fell off for me, and I wasn't as invested in that story as much as the first part. So for me, it's more like the entertainment aspect of it just wasn't quite there, or wasn't quite to sort of the level that I wanted, but could be different for yourself. So I think I'll give it a 6 out of 10.
For me, the bottom line is it's kind of missing an identity. It's missing an idea. If you're doing the 27th adaptation of a story, I think you do need to have an angle, and this is missing that. And while a lot of pieces certainly are like a quality production, that is the part that kills it for me. Like I'm still waiting for my definitive Frankenstein version that really like gets the story and really gets the character and really does something interesting with it and maybe modernizes it in just the right places or whatever. And I was walking into this hoping to get that, and I didn't. And maybe that's part of why I'm reacting to it the way I am. I started off totally motivated, totally on board to like this movie, and by the end of it, I was waiting for it to be over because I just was not getting anything out of it. So, like on that level, it was a really disappointing watch. I wouldn't recommend it on the basis of it doesn't do anything interesting, in my opinion. So it's a 5 out of 11.
All right, guys. Thank you very much for joining into today's semi-debate. Hervé,
If you reach this part of the episode, as always, we appreciate you rocking with us. We appreciate you pressing play. And as always, if you liked what you heard today and you enjoyed our discussion, you should probably tell a friend. And if you hated everything and you thought we're chatting a bunch of nonsense, you should probably tell an enemy. We are the Eye of the Storm podcast.
we will catch you next time. Au revoir.
Ciao.
Bye bye.